Hi, I'm Amisha, Head of Policy and Public Affairs at Mainstream Renewable Power. Our organisation, in partnership with Kent and K&L Gate LLP, has launched the US Offshore Wind Handbook at the International Offshore Wind Partnering Forum in Atlantic City, New Jersey, which is taking place this week. I'm delighted to sit down with our very own Una Brosnan, Head of Strategy and New Markets Offshore, who is also one of the co-authors of the handbook. Hi, Una, welcome.
Hi, Misha. Thanks for having me.
Una, can you give us a bit of a background to the handbook and how its previous editions have been received? How did the concept initially start? Just give us the history.
Yeah, I suppose originally I was in the US as part of a US trade delegation, and we were, I suppose, inundated with questions around the regulatory framework, looking at the technical background for offshore wind in the US and how we could, take the lessons learned from Europe and bring it across and apply to the US market. At that stage, the market was really just at the cusp of taking off. The cost reduction the market was just realizing in Europe. They were really getting an interest, and it wasn't the first time that the US market tried to launch offshore wind. So I think it was about the third or fourth attempt. But it was the first time, I suppose, I went to an event where I really saw it as a milestone event. And it felt like the right time. And there was so much interest. We felt a handbook might actually be really, really useful to capture the just the layman's terms around the technical, what we were dealing with. What do we mean when we say a monopile? What do we mean when we say an offshore substation or a jacket or fixed or floating substructure? And it was really just to break it down for people, so give them an opportunity to get familiar with the language, the technical language, the regulatory background, and where it was coming, and what was important within the legislation, where they need to touch, where it needed to resonate quite well from a state and federal perspective. So hence the opportunity, and it made sense for us to partner then with a legal entity, to bring that knowledge and experience for the legal and regulatory elements of the package. So it actually worked really well, and it was over a conversation around offshore wind and how best can we approach the market.
And you just mentioned there that there'd been a few attempts at this, but never quite the right time. But obviously, it has launched this week. So why now? Tell us a bit about the market and why now's the time to launch and why now is the time to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, the handbook we first launched in 2018. It was in a previous life when I worked with an engineering design house called Atkins, and we partnered with K&L Gates. It's evolved, and I suppose various entities or various a number of my colleagues have moved on, and it's given a really good opportunity then to bring three entities together again. So this time around, we're launching it with K&L Gates, Kent, and Mainstream, and taking various perspectives from each of the entities. And really, I think it's bringing the various strengths and synergies across quite well into the handbook. The market has just exploded. I mean, particularly with the new administration coming in. We've seen, obviously, off the back of COP26, we saw some really, really strong commitments to decarbonize industry, pushing renewables, weaning ourselves off coal and oil. And I suppose, this really, really invigorated the market and the renewable side. And hence, you're seeing a commitment to developing and building out offshore wind in the US. We've seen a huge push, I suppose, with the change in administration coming in and committing to a number of auction leases in advance of 2025. Yesterday at IPF, there was another announcement again around auction leases. So, this is fantastic for the market. It really is. We talk about pipeline, visibility of pipeline and commitment from, whether it's state or federal bodies to the market. And this is exactly what the supply chain needs. And hopefully this handbook can give them the ammunition they have to build their teams, build their knowledge, and reach out to partnerships across in Europe to really realize the lessons learned and get them to realize these projects quicker, smarter, and more efficiently as well.
I've been very fortunate to have a sneak peek at the handbook just before it launched, and I noticed that there's a strong content on both the fixed and the floating side, which are a big push in the US across the coastline. So, any insights into that, and how difficult was it sort of getting the content together as the markets are are quite different, I guess, in that respect in the States.
Yeah, I mean, the fixed really came to the forefront on the East Coast. I mean, we've a fantastic auction in New York. I mean, it was, I think, 3 days of nail biting excitement around how this was going to pan out. The prices were eye-watering. It was how is this going to realize for the market? So next on the horizon is a very interesting. Next up is the West Coast and California auction, looking at deep floating wind. I mean, we've seen a number of technology demonstration projects and pre-commercial projects in Europe, particularly around like Kincardine using the principal power technology. You've seen Equinor using their spar technology. You've seen projects like Hywind Tampen as well, which is using concrete solutions, a variation on their spar from their Scottish project, and applying it then to North Sea assets to decarbonize hydrocarbon assets as such. So floating wind is really on the cusp of commercialization, and I think it's a really exciting time for floating. We've seen the auction results for ScotWind with considerable gigawatts coming out of there, which are going to be already underway and kicking off in their development. But next up, I think the big one is California. So I think the time was pivotal just to bring these both to the forefront. They're very different markets from a supply chain perspective. Particularly the US brings some really big challenges with the Jones Act in particular. So that brings a change in how we potentially contract, how you set up your supply chain, because there is intricacies there from a legal perspective, and very much in K&L Gates section around that. We talk about the Jones Act in depth, and it's really good because for any new market entrants, this is exactly where we need to highlight some of the key areas that you need to focus on in the early days of developing an offshore industry in the US. This is hugely different to how we operate in Europe. So, these are key elements that we need to get a good understanding on and recognize from an early onset, and collaborate and innovate on how we, mitigate these challenges as well.
Thanks, Una. And lastly, then, just as a wrap up, a 20-30 second pitch on why our network who have tuned in should download and read the handbook.
I mean, the US offshore wind farm industry has really undergone a rapid growth and change over the past year. And I mean, what we'd like to do is invite people in, whether it's working in the supply chain, it's working in development, or getting involved from a financing investment perspective. So, come read the handbook, see what you think of the industry, ask questions, ask your colleagues, reach out to industry. There's a fantastic group of people building up both on the east and west and down in the Gulf region as well, who've got, fantastic skills from either working in a marine environment or in hydrocarbons that we really can tempt across into this truly exploding market. So hence, pick it up, have a read, and come back to us. We'd be delighted to share further knowledge and the experience we've had, particularly in Europe and in APAC, because this is truly a really exciting new enterprise. And I think for anyone in the US, particularly maybe young generations coming through, looking at where they'd like their careers to go, it doesn't have to be engineering solely. There's finance, there's legal, there's a vast array of skill sets that we're looking at for in the industry. Have a read and let us know what you think.
Una, congratulations on the launch and thank you very much. Thanks to our network for tuning in. Details of where to find the handbook are on our company website. Thank you very much.